Hello, so this will be the second and final day, actually, that we're going to talk about the digestive system, so we're going to breeze through this pretty quickly. We left off talking about kind of that alimentary canal and the organs that are contained within that digestive system, and we kind of left off, I think, talking about the small intestines. But I want to talk about the structure of these villi and how important they are. Villi and microvilli. So whenever we see kind of wavy structures, or in the case of our intestines, inside the intestinal wall, there are lots and lots and lots. It's just covered with these things called villi, these little kind of finger-like appendages, which simply serve to increase the surface area. So think of if you had a string and you were going along the inside of your intestines, how long it would be. We kind of mentioned that early, like about 18 feet. But if you had to take that same string and go around each one of these little finger-like appendages, it would be far, far longer than the 18 feet. So it increases that surface area by which that absorption of nutrients can occur. And since all of that absorption happens in the small intestines, they need to be really super efficient at absorbing those nutrients from the foods that we eat. So villi and then microvilli are just smaller ones, but super important to increase that surface area so that it can do its job more efficiently. And here I actually love this visual because it shows, so this is a cell that's lining that intestinal wall, and you can see the microvilli appendages on here. So see how this cell tends to be a little longer and thinner. So here's where right here is where that nutrient absorption is going to occur. This being the inside of the intestines. Large intestine, then we kind of mentioned the primary function is for that absorption of water. Most of the nutritional components have already been absorbed by the small intestine before it empties into the large intestine. The large intestine does include colon, rectum, cecum, which is a little appendage that kind of sticks out from it, and then the anal canal leading to the anus. The appendix, again, a projection of the cecum that plays a role in fighting infections. You can live without your appendix. People do all the time, but it actually does have a purpose. Helps fight infections, and they also believed that it was important back when we ate more grass for producing rumen to help break down that grass. There's also some vitamins that are produced by the natural bacteria that live there, vitamin B and K. And then it kind of forms your feces, so it forms it into the form that it's going to take as it leaves your body. So rectum, at the very, very last part of that large intestine. So the way that food moves kind of through here, so the food kind of enters the large intestine on this side. It goes up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, and then moves down into the rectum and then leaves the body here. Again, there's a sphincter on the inner and outer sphincter. So inner sphincter is involuntary. Outer sphincter you control. Actually, hopefully you can. When you need to go to the bathroom, you have time to find a bathroom before that becomes an involuntary function, right? Accessory organs. So there's lots of things that need to happen. It's not just simply we eat food, it goes through here, and bada bing, bada boom, we have all this nutritional uptake and we're fine. We know that there's a lot of enzymes produced, so organs that add enzymes are really important. So these include, we mentioned that amylase enzyme from the salivary glands. There's enzymes produced by the liver. The liver also helps filter blood. insulin produced by the pancreas that's needed for glucose intake into the cells. We've talked about that. Liver produces bile, but it's concentrated into the gallbladder. Bile is really important in helping us break down fats. So you can live without your gallbladder because your liver is going to still produce bile. It won't be that concentrated bile. My daughter actually, during her last pregnancy, had her gallbladder fail. It was full of gallstones, so I think baby was, I don't know, a couple, 3 weeks old, maybe something like that, and she had to have her gallbladder removed. So some people have a lot of issues after having it removed, like they really have issues if they eat fatty foods. Other people, not at all. So she doesn't really seem to be having any issues with it, but I know some people are like, oh, I can never eat fatty foods again or anything rich like that. But yep, so the gallbladder is important. We can live without it though. So kind of talked about this already. For filtering the blood, liver is important in that filtration process, and for digestion of fats. Producing bile, it doesn't generally release right from the liver. It goes into the gallbladder, which is this sac-like organ attached to the back of the liver. There's also some vitamins and fats and synthesis of some plasma proteins. Glucose is converted. So glucose doesn't store in our bodies very well, so we do convert excess glucose to glycogen, which is better for long-term storage. So that glycogen is really, it just stores better in our bodies for when we need it, and it can be converted back and used. Pancreas secretes digestive juices to the duodenum is just the first part of your small intestine. It's broken into 3 sections. This is just the first. Contains bicarbonate, which is a base. So think of baking soda, which is sodium, hydrogen, or I'm sorry, calcium, hydrogen. Oh, I'm forgetting the chemical name. But baking soda is a base that has bicarbonate in it. And it's used to neutralize acid. Same thing in your body. So when you take an antacid, it probably has bicarbonate in, but your pancreas naturally does some of that for you. It contains a lot of different enzymes. Trypsin, lipase, pancreatic amylase, all of these help in breaking down of food. It also, I mentioned on the previous slide, releases insulin into the blood. Insulin is that carrier molecule. That's how glucose gets into cells. Glucose has to get into cells. It doesn't do any good for our bodies if we can't get it inside of the cells. Gallbladder stores bile, concentrates some of that bile, and then empties that bile into the digestive system. Okay. We're not going to talk a lot about diet here. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables. That's the big message. Moving on. So the push lately really is to eat more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. There is some discussion about, so there's a lot of just plain old white bread that says whole grain now. There is some discussion about, well, it's still pretty processed and how healthy is it really? It is whole grain, but it's better if you have less processed stuff. We encourage lean meats, less fats, be physically active, and plan. You can plan your meals. There's just a website shared here if you ever want to check it out to help you plan a healthy diet. Those of you going off to college, maybe you want to take a look at that. We eat food to rebuild tissues and stuff that are necessary in our body. I think that's pretty obvious. Carbohydrates. I think we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about carbohydrates other than, like I said, you should eat complex carbs and less processed carbs. Obviously, there's good carbs, bad carbs. I think we talked about that earlier, or maybe it was last semester, but I know you guys hear it a lot in health class and so on. So as far as health and wellness, we know that excess carbohydrates do end up being stored as fat. We also, in this country, we hear a lot about the risks of obesity. Obesity is a major health concern. There's a lot more cancers in people who are obese, and maybe you have or have not heard that. I'm sure you've heard heart disease and type 2 diabetes from severe obesity. But cancers, like breast cancer, surprisingly, being obese is a much higher risk factor. And colon cancer, and some other kinds of cancers. Balance of carbohydrates. Again, some carbohydrates we talk about lower and higher glycemic index. Refined sugars and fructose sweeteners may contribute to obesity because they do end up getting stored as fat. High glycemic index foods increase the blood glucose levels. We typically want lower glycemic index. Things that you eat that have a high glycemic index increase the blood sugar glucose levels dramatically, quickly. Lots of sugar that's broken down very easily. It's better to have low glycemic index typically. Things like peanut butter has a certain amount of carbs in it, but it processes very slowly, and that glucose is released over long periods of time instead of all at once. Proteins. We have to consume proteins because animals can't make their own amino acids. So amino acids, these building blocks of proteins, are necessary. So amino acids are necessary for building proteins, and if you don't consume all the amino acids, you can't build all the proteins that you need for building tissues and parts of cells and so on. So there's 20 different amino acids. We need to consume all of them. We need every single one of them in our bodies. A complete protein has all of those. If you eat meat or dairy, you're probably getting complete proteins. We also have protein in tofu, which is made of soy, and then soy milk, and other food that's processed from soybeans. So that is another source. Also legumes and those kinds of things have protein in them. They're not a complete protein though, so you have to be careful. So if you are not eating meat, you have to make sure that you're getting a complete protein. And you have to eat complete proteins every single day because amino acids are not stored in the body. Those of you who take protein supplements, and sometimes people who are vegan will do that, but also if you're, people who work out do that as well. If you're taking protein supplements, they're usually a complete protein. So they contain, and a lot of times they'll say it contains all 20 amino acids. Consuming too much protein, however, also a little bit of a concern, can cause dehydration during exercise and sweating, and also calcium loss in the urine, which can lead to kidney stones. So you have to balance it. You can't just be, and I tend to eat higher protein. I feel better if I eat higher protein, but I need to be careful that I'm also getting my fruits and veggies. Quick overview, and I'm going to let you read this on your own. Lipids are a good source of stored energy. They're not quickly broken down, but they're really, really good for storage, and they're really, really high in calories. Digestive system processes: ingesting, taking the food in; digestion, breaking it down; and elimination, of course, that undigested food or just waste products that leave the body through elimination. These are the three main phases of the digestive process, or digestive phases: cephalic phase, the gastric phase. Anytime we talk about gastric, we're always talking about the stomach. And then, of course, the intestinal phase. We can talk more about those when I come tomorrow. I'm going to skip it for today, honestly. And all of our body systems work together. The digestive system works closely with that endocrine system. There's hormonal responses that are important in the digestive system. The first hormonal response is that of producing saliva. Remember, I said sometimes if you think of certain foods, we can get that salivation process started. And we'll finish the last